Once upon a time, there was a little girl who lived in a village near the forest. Whenever she went out, the little girl wore a Red Riding cloak, so everyone in the village called her Little Red Riding Hood. One morning, Little Red Riding Hood asked her mother if she could go to visit her grandmother. "That's a good idea," her mother said. So they packed a nice basket for Little Red Riding Hood to take to her grandmother. When the basket was ready, the little girl put on her red cloak and kissed her mother goodbye. "Remember, go straight to Grandma's house," her mother cautioned. "Don't dawdle along the way, and please don't talk to strangers. The woods are dangerous." "Don't worry, Mommy," said Little Red Riding Hood. "I'll be careful." But when Little Red Riding Hood noticed some lovely flowers in the woods, she forgot her promise to her mother. She picked a few, watched the butterflies flit about for a while, listened to the frogs croaking, and then picked a few more. Little Red Riding Hood was enjoying the warm summer day so much that she didn't notice a dark shadow approaching out of the forest behind her. Suddenly, the wolf appeared beside her. "What are you doing out here, little girl?" the wolf asked in a voice as friendly as he could muster. "I'm on my way to see my grandma who lives through the forest, near the brook," Little Red Riding Hood replied. Then she realized how late she was and quickly excused herself, rushing down the path to her grandma's house. The wolf, in the meantime, took a shortcut. The wolf, a little out of breath from running, arrived at Grandma's and knocked lightly at the door. "Oh, thank goodness, dear. Come in, come in. I was worried sick that something had happened to you in the forest," said Grandma, thinking that the knock was her granddaughter. The wolf let himself in. Poor Granny did not have time to say another word before the wolf gobbled her up. The wolf let out a satisfied burp and then poked through Granny's wardrobe to find a nightgown that he liked. He added a frilly sleeping cap and, for good measure, dabbed some of Granny's perfume behind his pointy ears. A few minutes later, Red Riding Hood knocked on the door. The wolf jumped into bed and pulled the covers over his nose. "Who is it?" he called in a cackly voice. "It's me, Little Red Riding Hood." "Oh, how lovely. Do come in, my dear," croaked the wolf. When Little Red Riding Hood entered the little cottage, she could scarcely recognize her grandmother. "Grandmother, your voice sounds so odd. Is something the matter?" she asked. "Oh, I just have a touch of a cold," squeaked the wolf, adding a cough at the end to prove the point. "But grandmother, what big ears you have," said Little Red Riding Hood as she edged closer to the bed. "The better to hear you with, my dear," replied the wolf. "But grandmother, what big eyes you have," said Little Red Riding Hood. "The better to see you with, my dear," replied the wolf. "But grandmother, what big teeth you have," said Little Red Riding Hood, her voice quivering slightly. "The better to eat you with, my dear," roared the wolf, and he leapt out of the bed and began to chase the little girl. After being chased by the wolf, Little Red Riding Hood ran as fast as she could through the forest. She could hear the wolf's footsteps behind her, getting closer and closer. Her heart was pounding in her chest, and she felt like she couldn't run any longer. Just when she thought she couldn't go on, she saw a small cottage in the distance. With the last bit of energy she had, she sprinted towards the cottage and banged on the door. An old woman opened it and quickly pulled her inside. The old woman, who was actually a kind witch, cast a spell to hide Little Red Riding Hood from the wolf. The wolf arrived at the cottage, sniffing around, but couldn't find her. Frustrated, the wolf eventually gave up and left. Little Red Riding Hood thanked the old woman for saving her. The kind witch offered her some tea and a place to rest. As they sat by the fire, the old woman told Little Red Riding Hood stories of her own adventures in the forest. They laughed and talked for hours. Little Red Riding Hood learned a lot from the old woman, including how to be brave and clever. She realized that she was stronger than she thought. The next morning, Little Red Riding Hood felt ready to continue her journey to her grandmother's house. The old woman gave her a magical amulet for protection. With a grateful heart, Little Red Riding Hood hugged the old woman and set off once again. This time, she felt confident and unafraid. As she walked through the forest, she noticed the beauty around her. The birds were singing, and the sun was shining through the trees. She knew that the wolf might still be out there, but she also knew that she had the strength and wisdom to face any challenge. When she finally reached her grandmother's house, she was greeted with a warm hug and a delicious meal. She told her grandmother all about her adventure. Her grandmother was proud of her for being so brave and resourceful. They spent the evening talking and enjoying each other's company. Little Red Riding Hood realized that the journey had changed her. She was no longer the scared little girl who had left home. She had faced her fears and come out stronger on the other side. She knew that she could handle anything that came her way. And so, Little Red Riding Hood and her grandmother lived happily ever after, knowing that they were safe and loved.